Good morning. Hi, friends. Happy Monday. My name is Libby, and welcome to my audio journal, Finding Joy in the Shadows, where I spend time each week talking about the fun curveballs life throws our way and help us look for pockets of joy. This is also an opportunity for me to continue working through my own life struggles while also sharing ways to help anyone who is listening work through some things in your life that you might be struggling with so that we all can find joy together. For today's conversation, we will focus on how change can still be joyful. We will explore ways where we can stay positive and find joy during times of change and uncertainty. But before we get started, let's spend a few minutes catching up on some recent happenings, some LPs that came across my radar last week. Um, this is a big week for me. It's my birthday week. When I was a kid in my family, our birthdays meant getting front seat privileges in the car and choosing the dinner meal, which was a big deal back then. If we were lucky, we would get to go out to dinner. And then I would have a smile on my face from ear to ear when the staff would come and sing happy birthday to me. I loved those free ice creams. But I will say, once I hit 22, the allure and excitement of turning another year older started to vanish. And I hate to have to admit this out loud, but I may have told a fib here and there whenever anyone asked me how old I was after 22. I know, hashtag sorry, not sorry. Um, every time my brother heard me struggle to admit my age or would grimace when I was like, oh, it's my birthday. I don't want to get older. Um, he would remind me so matter of fact that not everyone gets the chance to grow old, and we should feel lucky if we get the chance to do. So I am trying to embrace turning another year older. I will say thank you to my strict skincare regimen and avoiding sunlight like a vampire. I might not look my age yet, but trust me, I am starting to feel it. Last week at the Reach for Ralph benefit dinner, I mentioned in last week's episode, I asked my friend Mark, who is a whole year older than me, what I could expect in turning 45. And he advised me to start stretching every night to prevent arthritis. Now, at first, I thought he was being funny because that's just who Mark is, but he was very serious. And so I had to do a little Google search on it. And apparently, when we hit 45, it means our bones start shrinking, our muscles begin to weaken, and we might shrink a bit too, which is awesome for someone who's already 5 foot even. So that's great to hear. Um, I am looking forward to spending the weekend with my dear friends and my family. We have plans to do some top golf and eat some Korean barbecue. So, looking forward to that. Weather should be nice. So, cheers to another year for me around the sun. Real quick shout out. Thank you to my big sis, Beck. I love my custom purple Nikes that you gave me yesterday at dinner. I can't wait to wear them out this weekend. Speaking of birthdays, one of my favorite K drama actors had a birthday a few days ago, Lee Min Ho. And I share a birthday month with him, and that just tickled my heart. I did not know that we had that in common. For those of you who don't know, I actually found BTS through way of the K drama train. So thanks to some smart marketing on Instagram, I started seeing advertisements for a show called Tale of the Nine-Tailed, which stars the very handsome, very dreamy Lee Dong-wook. Trust me, if you look him up, he is very handsome. And so I started liking those posts that I was seeing, which then changed my algorithm, which helped introduce me to shows like Extraordinary Attorney Woo, which is how I was then introduced to the king of K dramas, Mr. Lee Min Ho, who also stars in The King Eternal Monarch, which is one of my absolute favorite K dramas. I love the show. I love him. I've probably seen most of his movies now, and I am a proud minnow. That is what he refers to his fans as, a minnow. So I am a very proud minnow. I love this man, and I will say he probably has one of the best laughs you will ever hear come out of anyone's mouth. Go and see for yourself. Look him up. Just type in Lee Minnow laugh, and you will not be disappointed. All of these movies I just listed, they are some of my absolute favorites. Highly recommend if you haven't gotten on board with the whole K-drama scene, I highly recommend you start. I think I was actually into these shows for about a year, maybe a little bit more than that, when I had that fateful lunch with my homegirl Kirsty, where we were catching up over salads, and I told her I was obsessed with these K-dramas, even though I had no idea what anybody was saying, and it took me forever to get through one episode because I was constantly reading the subtitles and then having to rewind and read it again because it was going quickly. But I loved them. And it was at that moment that she said, "Well, if you like all these K dramas, then I bet you'll like BTS. You should give them a try." So the rest was history after that. So again, if I'm annoying you with all my BTS talk, please send all your hate mail to Kirsty. Speaking of my BTS boys, Jimin announced he is releasing his second solo album July 19th. I loved his first solo album, Face. I don't know if I'm allowed to sing it, but now I have like the song Set Me Free, like going on in my head. So I'm very excited to hear his new album. Um, as a newbie member of K-pop and the BTS fandom, I will say it's been kind of funny to watch all the K-pop fandoms battle one another on the socials. Again, still very new to this world, but I guess many of the non-BTS fandoms, which I can't believe there are people that aren't fans of them out there, but still K-pop fans. But anyway, for anyone that's a non-BTS fandom, they were, I guess, a bit relieved when BTS announced that they would be going into the military because many felt it meant the spotlight would then open up for their favorites to consume it. But BTS prepared so much content, and now Jin is out of the military and will be releasing his solo album soon, and Hobie gets out in October. So this spotlight has legit never moved away from these guys. Um, and I'm laughing, I know, but I do feel bad. There are tons of talented individuals in the K-pop world, and everyone deserves their moment to shine. But come on. The fact that K-dramas and K-pops have made their way to little old me in Plymouth, Minnesota, um, I think it's safe to say that if anything coming all this way, they have to be fairly monumental to make it all this way. So love your fandom, support your favorites, but be careful what you put out into the universe. If you put negativity out, that is what you will attract, and you will not you you don't want that. Because speaking of which, has everyone heard about the DWI heard around the world? Justin Timberlake has found himself to be in some quite a bit of hot water. He was arrested last week um, because he was having difficulty staying in the lane that he was driving in. And then he refused three times to take the breathalyzer, which then forced the police to arrest him, and he spent the night in jail. And I was reading an article in the Star Tribune yesterday that he was seen afterwards just trying to have a quiet night. And sorry if this comes out too harshly, but are you kidding me? A quiet night? In the era of Uber and Lyft, not to mention Justin Timberlake has how many millions of dollars more than us, right? He could have easily paid someone to drive himself home. And in today's world, driving under the influence, we know that he easily could have injured someone, could have killed someone. And I'm not okay with it. So when I was reading this article and hearing how he was attempting to have a quiet night, and he was quoted saying, "I know sometimes I'm hard to love, but you keep loving me and I love you right back. So let's have a sing along." And I was like, is he being for real right now? Like, not, I'm sorry. Please forgive me for making such an error. I don't know, fall on the I'm having a really hard time moment sword, and everyone will be like, "Okay, but like start with an I am really sorry for the choices that I made. Please forgive me." Sorry. Anyway, I'm moving on. But homeboy, you need to do better. Um on a more positive note though, the Paris Olympics are only 31 days away from the time I am recording this episode, which means every sport right now is having their trials. And my true love is gymnastics. I legit have been obsessed with this sport since I saw Mary Lou Retton tumble across the floor back in 1984, winning the our first individual gold for women. Minneapolis is playing host to the gymnastic trials. So it starts on Thursday night. Very excited. 10 athletes will be selected, five men, five women. Minnesota's hero, Miss Suni Lee, will be vying for a spot for her second Olympic team, and I'm so excited for her, sending her all the love and support. I've seen the practice videos she's been uploading on Instagram, and if she can just copy paste those routines this week, I would be shocked if she wasn't part of the lineup. Simone Biles, don't really know what more I can add to her amazing resume. She looks good. She looks healthy. She looks happy. I wish her all of the best. If she also copy and pastes, her practice routines, I mean, we know she's on that lineup. Jade Carey is still so powerful even after the Tokyo Games and being in the collegiate world, still so powerful. Her form has actually gotten better, I think. So she looks fantastic. I can't wait to see how she performs at the trials. Would love to see her make the team. One of the newcomers, Shilese Jones. She's a newer face, but you know that expression from the movie Dirty Dancing, no one puts baby in a corner. Do not underestimate this girl. She is a powerhouse. She is a fierce competitor, and she has the ability from a point standpoint to go toe to toe with Miss Simone Biles. So if she can have a good weekend, I know she has to be part of the conversation. Leanne Wong is competing at the trials, and I love her style of gymnastics, but I haven't seen a whole lot from her since the last Olympics when she was made alternate. I've seen a couple of her collegiate competitions, and she's just a joy to watch. She has fluid movements, which is nice to see, especially on balance beam. I love watching her on the beam. Um, for the dudes, Brody Malone, Yule Moldauer, if those are newer names to you, highly recommend checking them out. Their gymnastics is just phenomenal to watch. Love them on the high bars. I love watching Donnell Wittenberg. The man is just one massive muscle, and he experiments with so many skills. He is just trying to push gymnastics, especially men's gymnastics, to like the next level. And I would love to see all of his efforts pay off and make the team. Um, so I am cheering him on. But I will probably be cheering on our hometown Golden Gopher, Shane Wiskus, maybe a little bit louder because he's the hometown boy. So I gotta, between Suni and Shane, I gotta support the Minnesotans that are out there. So very excited for this week. It's my birthday. The gymnastics trials. I caught a little bit of track and field the other day. I saw Miss Shakari Richardson has officially qualified for Paris, and I cannot wait to cheer her on and uh, see her sprint. I mean, she is just a phenomenal athlete, such a powerhouse. So very excited. If you can't tell, I live for the Olympics. I'm very excited. My best friend Teresa and I, we never miss an opening ceremony. We're very excited. We've already cleared our schedules so that we will be watching. So I think I think that's all I have on my Libby's problems, my real world topics. Um, so we'll go ahead and hop into the rest of our conversation. Per usual, I have my iced coffee on hand. I will say my little Lou, she is back to full health. So I dropped her off at doggy daycare this morning, and she could not wait to get there. She's like dropping a toddler off at daycare. Like she's a big kid. She doesn't need me to carry her in. She knows where she's going. And so I do. I as soon as I get her out of the car, I put her on the pavement or the sidewalk and she walks herself in. And this morning when we walked into the lobby of the doggy daycare that we go to, Camp Bow Wow, she just walked right past all the workers. She was like, I got this, you guys. I know exactly which door I need to go in and I take a left. Like she just was like, I know what I'm doing. I'm a big kid. So she is having fun today. Should be a really hot day outside. So I hope she gets some outdoor play as well. So there shouldn't be too many background noises today. So we're going to spend the rest of our time together discussing ways we can embrace change. So instead of fearing it or like me freaking out over it, we will explore ways to help us manage the process a little bit easier, just a little bit. Might not make the process completely joyful, but hopefully after today's life hack, any changes you are encountering, my hope is these tips will help the process be a little bit smoother. And I know I am probably biting off way more than I can chew with this week's topic. Let's face it, how many of us really like change? Um, I know for my more analytical brains out there, if you're if you are out there listening to me, that you might be innately better equipped at managing change. But to my fellow empaths that might be out there, I think you will agree we would love to have some of your stoic mindsets because that is not the case for an empath. Speaking for myself, it wasn't until I hit my 40s that I finally figured out how to manage change somewhat okay. So it's taken me a long time to figure this out. So I'm certainly not speaking as an expert. I am simply going to share with you my process. Um, it took me many steps, both big, small, over years, okay, all compounding on top of each other to help me finally become more comfortable with change. And I'm going to do my best to break down the steps and the processes I took to help get me there. Um, you know, I often joke that, I don't know, maybe my ability to finally manage change might just be a sign of Stockholm syndrome. I just eventually grew to love the chaos and uncertainty that once held me hostage. I don't know, you be the judge. Um, but before we get too far ahead, I first want to dissect the word change. What does it even mean? Well, at its core, the definition of change is neither positive nor negative. According to Merriam-Webster, change simply means to make something or someone different, to alter, or to modify. That's it. The word itself is quite neutral, but it's the context of how we view the change that helps us understand if it's good or maybe not so good. From my perspective, there are two main types of change we encounter most in our lives. Feel free to correct me, but if I had to choose the most common and impactful changes, they would be one, changes we choose to make or create, and two, changes that are forced upon us. All forms of change requires an adjustment period, even if we are the ones that initiated it. However, in my opinion, the most difficult type of change are the ones that we didn't ask for, the change that forces us to adapt and adjust. And it's the second type of change that we're going to be discussing further today, or I'm going to do my best to discuss further today. From a very young age, change has been a constant companion in my life. I love my dad, and I mean no disrespect to his memory when I say this, but he wasn't so great at keeping a job. And as a result, from a very young age, we're going back like preschool, kindergarten, okay, very young me, I felt the hurt, the pain, the struggle that comes with losing a job. Before I turned 20, my family moved 7 times. I was always the new kid, always having to make new friends. My parents lived in a cycle where every couple of years things would be good, then things were great, and then whoops, our walls would come crumbling down again. And with that came change. New home, new school, new friends, new life. And this pattern repeated itself every few years, shaping my very early experiences. So that by the time I reached adulthood, I will be the first to admit I was not emotionally prepared to handle many things. And change was certainly at the top of that list, no matter how big or small. Whenever I encountered a situation requiring me to change or adjust, it was emotionally crippling for me. I would resist it, always viewed it as a negative, and fought the change tooth and nail before finally giving in and accepting the change. But it was never without a struggle. Can anyone else relate to this? Interestingly, my brother found a way to adapt to change as an adult. Even though he grew up in the same house and lived through the same experiences, he was able to view change through a different lens when he became an adult. And he was always trying to get me to see his perspective. He would say, Libby, you can't change the direction of the stream. You just have to go with the flow. Now, He might as well have been speaking Chinese for all the good that it did. Because in those early years of me learning how to adult, I lacked the skills to truly grasp his advice, let alone follow it. For many years, this is how I rolled through my life, resisting change amidst a series of challenges. And then fast forward to 2021, we're smack dab in the middle of the pandemic, where working from home was still the norm. And in January 2021, I accepted a manager role that would require me to move to Texas. However, when I was accepting the role, my hiring manager assured me that he could not foresee us ever going back into the office ever again. He just could not see that ever happening. So I happily accepted the role and was living the dream. Then 2022 came around and bam, leadership dropped a bomb on us. And they were like, forget about working from home indefinitely. We're going to go back into the office. It was their gentle nudge to get us to start mentally preparing and planning for a move if we didn't live close to the office. Um, it would still be another year before they made that announcement official and set a return date. But at that moment, all I knew was another unexpected change was coming my way. Now, imagine if you are someone like me who has struggled with change and disruptions their entire life. When I heard this news, let's just say I didn't take it well. No, I didn't take it well. Newsflash, there were tears. There were a lot of tears, tons of tears. I cried for months, anxiously awaiting the official notice to come down. Thankfully, I had a friend, colleague, partner in crime who was in the same situation as me. And we would spend hours dissecting the situation, coming up with every conspiracy theory under the sun about why they were making us move, even though it was clear from the start. My leadership never hid the fact that this role I was accepting required me to be in Texas. Then, during one of our marathon discussions, my colleague dropped some knowledge of her own. And even though what she said was so simple, it was still profound. It had a profound effect on me, and it legit stopped me in my tracks. Just as I was about to launch into another emotional breakdown over this unwelcome change, she calmly said, well, I guess she asked me, Libby, if losing our job because we won't move is the worst thing that could happen, would it really be that terrible? Now, at that moment, I felt something literally shift in my brain. I don't know if my brain legit broke, but I sat there replaying my friend's question in my head, thinking, well, no, and admitted to myself that if I choose not to move and my company responds by letting me go, then I've been down this road before. Having been laid off 3 times in my professional career, I had the experience and knowledge to lean on to help me navigate that path. So while I knew it wouldn't be ideal in that moment, I also knew I was equipped to handle this scenario if this was my path. Suddenly, the sting and fears I was feeling melted away, practically disappeared. And I did. I felt like a new person. I kid you not. I could finally view the situation with a clear mind, free from the fear because I realized I had said the word choice. I had a choice. And that one tiny word brought everything into clear view for me. My company had every right to want their employees to return to the office. If you didn't live within a commutable distance, then they had every right to ask you to move closer. But in that moment, when I realized I still had choices, I could choose to accept or decline their request. Realizing I had choices meant that this situation was no longer being completely forced upon me. Sure, I still had to deal with the repercussions of my choice. I'll admit, it still didn't make me happy. But knowing I still had control over my destiny made me feel not as fearful. I was still in charge of writing my story, and that made me feel calm. From that moment on, I told myself, okay, there are 26 letters in the alphabet. So I'm going to devise 26 plans of action. And I found comfort in knowing that one of these plans would be successful. It made me feel calm. I felt relaxed, as if all the stress and fear had finally melted away after months and months of worrying on it. I was able to finally sleep at night. For the first time in my life, I no longer feared this change. And my brother's motto of going with the flow finally clicked. It wasn't about sitting back and just being okay with what was happening all around me. It was me going back to the basics and accepting the things I couldn't change and focusing on the things I could. That's when it finally clicked for me. I realized it was about identifying the things I could control. If I had control over something, then I knew how to devise a plan of action. If I didn't have control over something, well, I had already trained my brain not to focus on it, to not give it oxygen. Now, I will admit, I never came up with 26 actual plans. It was more like 5, but they were good ones, really good ones. And all of them were moving me forward at the same time. I was very vocal about these plans. Once I decided I wouldn't be moving to Texas, there was almost an instantaneous acceptance of what I needed to do next. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scared, I wasn't fearful, I was strong, and my mind was clear. When I think back to that time in my life, I wasn't aware I was doing anything special. While researching how to effectively manage change for this week's podcast, I reflected on my own years of struggling and resisting change. It finally dawned on me, though, almost unexpectedly, when I had my aha moment about will I move to Texas or not, that I had unknowingly finally grasped the essence of the law of detachment. According to Google, this principle involves relinquishing control and releasing expectations. Simply put, it's about detaching oneself from specific outcomes and trusting that everything will unfold as it should. When I read this, I don't interpret the word trusting as simply sitting back and doing nothing, right? Just waiting for all the pieces to magically fall into place. No. Instead, I saw it as accepting the things we cannot change, having the courage to change the things we can, and possessing the wisdom to know the difference. However you feel most comfortable labeling it, whether you call it the law of detachment or simply reciting the serenity prayer, like I just did, this is exactly what I had unknowingly accomplished in that moment. You may have heard people say to you, oh, just trust the process. Trust the universe. Give it to God. Everything's going to be okay. Has anyone ever had this said to them while they're in the midst of freaking out over something? Speaking from personal experience, before gaining the foundation and understanding of how to apply the law of detachment, these statements can be frustrating and crazy making. It can feel overwhelming because we struggle to comprehend how exactly everything will be okay when key pieces of the puzzle are missing from our understanding. However, once we grasp the concept of distinguishing between what we can control and what we can't, these comforting sayings start to make sense. Gabby Bernstein is a New York Times bestselling author. She is a spiritual teacher and a life coach. And I came across a really helpful article of hers on her website that I think could help someone get started in laying out the groundwork on how to apply the law of detachment effectively. You can find her article titled How to Detach from Outcomes on her website, gabbybernstein.com. And I found her steps easy to follow and kind of wish I had learned them several years ago. If we find ourselves struggling with change, it's likely because we are trying to control the outcome, regardless of the situation. Instead of trusting the person, trusting the situation, or trusting the process, we often become frustrated because the process of change is beyond our control. Gabby explains that when we are attached to a specific outcome, we actually hinder our ability to manifest or plan effectively. And she suggests we first need to acknowledge how we are attached to the outcome. If we're unsure whether we are attached to an outcome or not, She provides some example questions that we can ask ourselves to help clarify. First one is, are we attached to something happening in the time frame we are comfortable with? Maybe. Are we fixated on someone doing something in the way we want? Could be. And the last one, do we think something will be a disaster if it doesn't go exactly as we planned it to go? Once we are able to acknowledge that we have an attachment to an outcome, the next step is finding a way to release it, detaching ourselves from it, surrendering to it, or giving it to God and the universe. Use whichever term or phrase you feel most comfortable with. I really liked seeing Gabby's questions because I feel they offer a first step, a really good first step in helping us identify if we are attached to an outcome, right? Are we attached to something happening in the time frame we are comfortable with? Are we fixated on someone doing something in the way we want? Do we think something will be a disaster if it doesn't go exactly as we planned it to go? If we can answer one of these with a yes and identify the outcome that we are attached to, then the next step, which I personally struggled with until my 40s, so give yourself some self-love if it takes you a minute too, is learning how to release the fear and stress caused by not being in control of the outcome. For me, the way I handled my aha moment was by focusing solely on the areas I did have control over. When my company was making plans to return to the office and I knew I didn't want to relocate to Texas, sorry, no disrespect, Texas. I just didn't want to leave Minnesota. But since I had no control over this decision, I devised multiple action plans that were within my control. I redirected all of my thoughts, all of my focus to those outcomes instead. Does that make sense? By focusing on what I could control, I was finally able to release the fear I was holding on to. Instead, I focused on what I could influence. And that is what finally allowed me to let go of the fear. I have since applied this technique to other situations in my life as well. For those of you that are still getting to know me, one thing I pride myself on are my close connections and relationships with my nieces and nephew, my little nibblings. I consider myself to be more of an aunt plus, not quite the parent, but more involved than just an aunt. So I've been an active player in most, if not all, of their life decisions. And it hasn't been easy learning how to become a passive player as they begin stepping into adulthood. This year alone, every single one of them is embarking on a journey I have zero control over. And that is really hard to admit, that I need to allow them to become the adult I helped raise. Still, very hard for me to say that out loud. And I empathize with my sister and my sister-in-law because if I'm struggling as the aunt, I am certain it's 10 times harder for them as the parent. But when I applied these steps, this technique, this hack, I realized I was attached to an outcome of wanting them to follow my advice and feared them making the wrong choice by not taking my advice. And I finally had that aha moment again and trained my brain to release the fear. Instead of creating tension between us or turning every conversation into either another round of me telling them what to do or reciting the ever helpful phrase, well, I told you so, I acknowledge that the one piece I could still control was being their coach and mentor. And this allowed me to still play an active role in their decision-making process, but by acknowledging this hard truth that it was time for them to stand or fall, and that I had no control over these milestones they are all facing, but no matter the outcome they find themselves in, I know I will always be there to help dust them off and redirect them. Some parts of this puzzle will always be unclear to us, and that is okay. The pieces we can't control won't magically solve themselves through this process either. Teaching ourselves to detach from outcomes is about learning to shift our focus to what we can control when we find ourselves in these situations. By thinking positively and focusing on the good things, we can then attract even more positivity and less fear into our lives. Remember, the law of detachment means allowing others to be themselves and accepting ourselves as we are. It's not about forcing situations and trusting that solutions will present themselves when we have clear minds. Uncertainty is part of the reality that we will not be able to change. But by focusing on what we can control, will help alleviate some of the fears we associate with the change. And most importantly, don't forget to embrace it. Find that joy in the new adventure. My challenge, as always, is baby step it. If you are facing a change in your life, first start by identifying the outcome and understand how you are attached to that outcome. Then look at the situation and figure out if there are pieces to the problem you can control. Maybe not the whole thing, but figure out which pieces you can control. And then train your brain to release the parts you do not have control over. Releasing these items will be the hardest step. Give yourself some self-love if it takes you a minute to learn how to do this. Trust the process. Trust the universe. Give it to God. It's going to be okay. Nod, nod, wink, wink. Okay, I think I've babbled on long enough. As always, we will add to this next week. I hope everyone has a great rest of your day, has an amazing week, and I look forward to our next chat. Peace out, friends.